a party would do. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. In this budget debate, I want to rise to talk about the economic choices facing our nation. So New Zealand faces a number of economic challenges. We face growing inequality, declining economic competitiveness relative to other nations, growing debt and a large number of Kiwis out of work. Over the last 60 years, New Zealand has seen a steady decline in comparative economic performance, and despite Kiwis working some of the longest hours for some of the lowest wages in the OECD, the country's sprinting, it's running as fast as we can just to stay where we currently are. In this Budget 2013 debate, I would like to see our Parliament put aside some of the pointless point scoring we've heard from the government benches, some of the petty partisan politics, the intellectually lazy reading of pre-prepared notes from research departments. Let's have a debate around the economic direction of our country. Let's ask some of the questions. What will it take to deliver a prosperous New Zealand for our kids? What is the direction we should be taking? Where are the new jobs, the new innovation going to come from? And is New Zealand currently on the right path? These are all important questions if we want our kids and future generations of New Zealanders to grow up knowing there are good jobs to go into. The question of whether New Zealand's going to keep sliding down that OECD ranking, and whether the poverty that some Kiwi families find themselves in right now is going to be exacerbated or alleviated in the coming decades. So, the government, they've tried to make this budget debate just about the surplus. But if you look at the numbers, there's the current account deficit, which is a more worrying measure of our economic performance. And what we know from the government's books is we're set to be the worst in the OECD by 2017. Our national debt is set to skyrocket, $61 billion extra over the next 5 years, and our tradable sector is struggling. And without new exports or innovation, we're going to have to keep selling the assets, have to keep resorting to borrowing offshore to maintain our lifestyles. And that's been confirmed just today with the OECD's 2013 Economic Survey of New Zealand released. So, when you drill down past the spin, what the budget reveals is severe structural problems facing us. They're getting worse. National's entire economic strategy is flawed. What we're doing as a country is digging ourselves ever deeper into an economic hole. The current path National has New Zealand on, it clearly isn't working. And as the saying goes, Mr Speaker, if you find yourself in a hole, it's time to stop digging. But despite the worst economic performance of New Zealand in the last 50 years, National's doing just that. The one answer they have to our economy is literally digging more holes. But Mr Speaker, why would you pick fossil fuels and digging more holes and drilling more wells as your one industry to save the economy? Look, it's got the fourth lowest royalty plus tax rate in the world. There's pages and pages of tax exemptions, and data out today shows the government is currently spending $46 million subsidising fossil fuel production and exploration in New Zealand. The government literally called out the Navy when iwi and protesters got in their way and changed the laws at the behest of foreign offshore oil companies. Now, I remember when the National Party used to talk about one law for all. Now what we hear from the National Party is one law for oil. That's what we hear. And another egregious display, just like the shameful Sky City deal, another display of making crony capitalist decisions for their mates. So the question the country should be asking is, why would you pick fossil fuels and dig in more holes as your winner? And why would you subsidise it? Because it's entirely a gamble. The government can't guarantee there's any oil there. We know the hypothetical oil is likely to be deep at sea. The only way it's ever going to be economically feasible to extract it is if the oil price is high. Now, if the oil price is high, what we know is every US $1 price rise in the barrel of oil wipes $40 to $60 million off New Zealand's GDP. If the oil price is high, given we still import 2/3 more oil than we export, we should be thinking about oil reduction plans, not oil dependency plans. And unlike most other governments, militaries, councils, businesses around the world, this government's got no plan to reduce our dependency on oil. They've got no plan to even start planning. The only plan they've got is a $12 billion borrowing binge for motorways and $46 million subsidies for oil drillers. It's the only plan they've got. And the government, they're not suggesting Kiwis are going to pay any less at the pumps if we find more oil. No, it's not a smart, sustainable area to focus on. We know it's jobs poor. We know the profits are going to flow offshore, and the government's own reports are saying 90+%. We know it's unsustainable, and there's still no plan what happens once you've used up the oil or drilled it. It's inconsistent with taking climate change seriously. And even the International Energy Agency says we can't even burn 70 to 80% of the oil we already know about without the government going and trying to subsidise people to find some more down in the depths of the ocean. It's a last century approach to economic development, and it's the same type of thinking that got us into the same mess we're in right now. It's a model based on resources, on commodities, on being a price taker, not a price maker. It's about not being able to influence our country's economic destiny. It's a hope, it's a gamble that someone will find something down there and they won't leave too much of a mess as they extract it, and maybe we'll clip the ticket somewhat as they send the profits offshore. Now, New Zealand's always going to lose under this strategy, and if you look at the other legs of the National Party's plan, dairy intensification and more mining, look, New Zealand's always going to lose out if we're trying to race Uruguay to cram more cows on a paddock. We're going to lose if we're trying to compete China to see who can drill more holes in the ground and compromising our environment. We're always going to lose in New Zealand if we're racing to trash our environment faster towards economic growth. Now, Mr. Speaker, another option, of course, is to look to the future. It's to have a plan around what's coming the next century, the century we're in, not the last century. It's to look at the markets and where international capital investment is heading. It's to focus on what Sir Paul Callaghan said was our strengths, our niches. It's to focus on a smart green strategy which is going to build a richer New Zealand. Our strengths are in technology, they're in clean energy, and a pure New Zealand brand that sees a premium paid when we export our products around the world. In 2011, Bloomberg reported that international capital investment in renewables outstripped fossil fuels. That's where the smart money's heading. That's where New Zealand should be looking, not making more holes in the ground. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against digging holes in the ground. In fact, I wouldn't mind digging a few, just some holes with a smarter rationale. I mean, I'd like to see the government dig a trench to have a second internet cable, to link New Zealand to our markets for resiliency, for competition benefits, to support our thriving ICT sector. I mean, this is $23 billion. It's grown by $3 billion in the last year alone. Over the same period, our oil imports have been down. And just today, the same OECD report I referenced said that New Zealand's high-cost, low-speed internet is slowing us down. The government could do more to support the sector, from greater education, apprenticeship scholarships, procurement, removing patent software, a second internet cable. There's a lot the government could do. And this is a much smarter future for New Zealand, because there's virtually no limit to the amount of software or ICT services we could be exporting around the world. But there is a limit to the amount of cows we can cram on a paddock or holes we can dig. Now, I'd also like to see another hole dug, this time in Auckland CBD. A CBD rail link for Auckland will transform our biggest city's public transport network. It's going to unclog it, it's going to benefit motorists primarily, and it's going to help supercharge our biggest city. So I think unclogging our biggest city's transport and reducing the $8 billion fuel import bill is a smart way. Now, thirdly, I want to see a power system that works for Kiwis, for Kiwi businesses, not for excessive profits. Every year, hundreds of millions of dollars is taken out of Kiwis' pockets and businesses' bottom line, and the excessive profits we see from the so-called market, which is acting like a huge stealth tax on our economy. Over the last 70 years, our electricity prices for families have risen by 70% in real terms, while across the rest of the OECD, theirs have dropped 6% on average. That's why we've put out the Kiwi Power, NZ Power plan to give Kiwis a choice, because what we're seeing is a real choice. Under National, more price rises, more excuses, more assets sold. Under the Greens and Labour, what you're going to see is cheaper, greener power, Kiwis saving $300 a year. Now, New Zealand Power is also going to deliver cheaper, greener electricity in a market which is more innovative, it's more smart, ready to take on the challenges, and growing clean energy exports is where the smart money is. That's where international investment's going, that's where the Pure Advantage group of business people say is a $6 trillion global green energy, clean tech sector that New Zealand can get a slice of. It's what PricewaterhouseCoopers says is a $22 billion economic opportunity for New Zealand. That's where we should be looking, not towards the past, not towards oil drilling and drilling more holes, more fracking, mining and drilling for New Zealand. Now, Mr. Speaker, in summary, we've got a great number of choices facing our country, a huge number of strategic economic challenges which aren't being addressed by the government with just a single-minded, media-friendly focus just on the deficit. What we need to do is look to the future, not to the past. It's to look at where we can develop our economy. It's to look to things like the tech sector. It's to look at growing green exports and clean energy. It's about the 100% pure brand. Aotearoa's future isn't looking to the past, it's looking to the future. Kia ora.
The Honourable Judith Collins.
That this debate be now adjourned.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. This debate is adjourned and set down for resumption next sitting day. Call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Prisoners and victims' claims continuation.